let's move on to the next kind of area of the study and look at the effective collection points of the CSAT data, because I think that's a nice building block for the next part of the conversation. I mean, when it comes to the effective means of collecting feedback, the study did reveal that whilst there's some indication as to what the mechanisms for collecting CSAT data works best, and in particular what wasn't working, which we'll touch on, which I thought was very interesting. When it comes to best practices regarding when to collect that information, there still seems to be a lack of consensus, and I think that's an area where there isn't a defined best practice. There isn't this is the way to go, and I think we've just seen that in the conversation as well. It's very much an evolving area. There's so many moving parts to take on board. The study showed that direct collection from the engineer tends to be seen as slightly more effective than any other means of collecting data. I think we could understand that, because the engineer's there, stood in front of you. It's going to be very hard not to. But as I think Danny, you said, equally that naturally skews that metric. Perhaps it's going to be very hard to say no, this engineer was absolutely useless when he stood there smiling at you. So I've always been a little bit suspect of that, and one thing I'd like to touch on is the importance of these metrics, because what are we collecting them for? If we're collecting them as a tick box exercise, then great, we'll boost our metrics, we'll get the higher numbers. If we actually want some insight, well, we're skewing them from the start. So we can maybe touch on that. I mean, email was very effective. That was interesting. Email was almost as effective as in-person collection. SMS surveys were the least effective according to the response set of this company's, at least. And I thought back to that myself, and I thought, yeah, I am more personally, I know anecdotally, I'm less likely to engage on an SMS basis. It's a bit clumsier, and I think I probably would have been more inclined to do that 5 years ago, whereas now, our phones are our core media centre. So whether it comes via email or WhatsApp or SMS, it doesn't really matter. So I thought that was quite an interesting area as well. But one of the things that I found really interesting in the data was the timing, and the question of the timing. Now, the largest response set, which was only around 33%, they said they collect data after the event. Then we had those that collect data directly from the engineer on site. It was about a quarter of companies. So let's look at the data. Very, very even split. Slightly more companies, 33%, as I said, wait until after 24 hours before reaching out. 29% of companies within 24 hours, and 24% collect data directly from the engineer themselves, so directly at the point of service. It opens up a number of different questions. Kevin, I'll start with yourself. It seems the split across when to collect data is very much up for debate, and the study revealing a reasonably even balance across those couple of options. There wasn't anything that stood out as this is the best practice. I mean, from your point of view, from the conversations you have with customers, obviously, they're going to be coming to you, your current customers, people that are coming to you as prospects. They're going to want you to have the magic bullet answer for this, and it seems that there isn't one in the industry. So, I mean, what are the merits? I won't ask you to say which is the best time, because I don't think anyone knows. But what would you say would be the merits and disadvantages of collecting at that point of service? Because that would obviously be the easiest way to get those numbers up. But like I say, potentially it skews the data. So,
of course, yeah. I think, look, there are no silver bullets to this in terms of the medium through which you collect the data, and the actual timing as well. It does come down to the individual or the organization that you're working with. So this is where it's very important to understand your customer and their preferences. Okay, so I might like to give my feedback immediately. You, Kris, may prefer to maybe have 24 hours consideration of how you felt the service was executed, and therefore provide your feedback then. So it comes back to the point, I think, is know your customer well, understand what is their preference. You'll understand their age. So a younger customer may be more prevalent to using SMS or social media. Whereas someone who's maybe of a more my vintage might be looking at more of an email, because actually I'm used to using emails and it's actually quite straightforward. So I think it really comes down to preferences and having that preference center within your solutions wherever they sit. Therefore, when an engineer or a customer service or anyone who engages with that customer, the automation of the request for how did we do is triggered based on the customer's preference and when they're likely to want to provide that sort of feedback to you. And I think that's really important for organizations to understand. It's not one size fits all. It's starting with the customer first, understanding their preferences, understanding nuances, their temperatures, etc., and then you act and execute how you need to based on that customer experience that you're trying to achieve with that individual.